The evening folds itself gently across the windowsill, a hush settling in like dust on old books, like the slow yawn of twilight over the edge of a teacup. And there, beyond the soft pane of glass, a single leaf trembles in the breeze, green and tender, its veins like rivers of light winding toward the unknown. I used to lie still for hours as a child beneath that same window, watching how the sun would shine through the leaf, just so. I thought it was made of glass or magic. I didn't yet know the language of cells or the quiet miracle of photosynthesis. All I knew was that it glowed. There is something sacred about the way a plant waits. It does not hustle. It does not announce its needs. It simply exists, reaching always in the direction of something better: light, water, warmth, and time. In a world obsessed with speed, it takes great courage to be still. And plants, these green alchemists of silence, have mastered the art of waiting with purpose. Take the houseplant by your bed, for instance. Maybe it's a pothos, its vines spilling softly over the edge of the pot, like hair across a pillow. Or maybe it's a fern, curled like a sleeping fist, slowly unfurling its thoughts to the morning. Whatever form it takes, it is listening to the rhythm of your breath, to the weight of moisture in the air, to the light shifting across the floor like spilled gold. It is not idle. It is not decoration. It is busy being alive in ways we are only just beginning to understand. All plants, in their quiet way, are composed of three primary organs: roots, stems, and leaves. That's what the textbooks say, but I think of them more poetically: the anchor, the spine, and the skin of light. Roots burrow down like questions whispered into the soil, searching for answers in the dark. Stems hold everything together, the unsung scaffolding of grace. And leaves, leaves are sunlight's diary, written in a language of chlorophyll and yearning. But let's not rush into definitions tonight. Let us meander. Let us drift like pollen. If we stay very quiet, we might begin to feel what the plant feels, not as a person, not as an animal, but as a being tuned to different frequencies. A consciousness made not of thoughts, but of presence. Imagine you are a seed. You are cradled in darkness, encased in a coat that remembers the rain. You know nothing of wind or sky or the sun's slow kiss. But you are not alone. Inside you is a blueprint, a song, a map of becoming. When the conditions are right, a little warmth, a whisper of water, you begin to wake. You split, just slightly. A rootlet stretches down, curious and pale, tasting the earth. A shoot pushes up, tentative, aching toward a light it has never seen. This is not instinct. This is choreography. Every plant begins with that quiet awakening. And from that moment on, it is a dance. Upward, outward, inward again. The roots dig deep, like memory. They explore without eyes, guided by gradients of moisture and minerals, avoiding toxins with the wisdom of a sommelier. The stem elongates, cell by cell, lifting its fragile burden toward the sky, and the leaves unfurl like pages in an old green book, thin and trembling, yet vital as breath. Inside each leaf, something astonishing unfolds. In tiny sunlit factories called chloroplasts, light is caught and turned into sugar. Not just any sugar, but the kind that feeds forests, that powers the bloom of orchids, that sweetens the air after rain. This process is photosynthesis, but I prefer to think of it as light weaving. Sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water are taken in, transformed, made into something new, and as a byproduct, a gift, really, oxygen is released. The very air you are breathing now may have been whispered into existence by a trembling leaf. But leaves do not work alone. They are part of a team. Water rises from the roots, drawn up through narrow tubes in the stem called xylem, a one-way road paved with capillary hope. Sugars, once made, travel downward through another network, the phloem, feeding roots and buds and dreams. It is a circulatory system without a heart, a postal service without a postmaster, and yet it works, flawlessly, patiently, persistently, and still the plant says nothing. No song, no gesture, just a steady unfolding, 1,000 choices made without words. If it is too dry, the stomata, tiny pores on the underside of leaves, will close to conserve water. If the sun is too strong, pigments will shift, protecting delicate tissues. If nutrients are scarce, roots will twist and turn in search of better ground. No one commands this. No central brain, no conductor. Just a symphony of signals, electrochemical whispers passing from cell to cell like gossip through a village. There is something deeply humbling in this, the idea that a plant, without voice or nerve or thought, can be so exquisitely aware of its world, not reactive, but responsive, not passive, but profoundly engaged. So its stillness is not apathy, it is attention. I often think of the oak tree at the edge of the field. It's older than me, older than my grandmother's grandmother. Its roots have drunk from the same wellspring for centuries. Its leaves have fallen and regrown more times than I've ever opened my eyes to the morning. And yet, it does not boast. It stands, it breathes, it waits, and in its waiting, it becomes a cathedral of green time. Even the smallest weed in the sidewalk crack has this nobility. It germinates in concrete, defying odds, pressing upward with a strength that belies its fragility. It blooms briefly, invisibly. It offers its pollen to the wind. And then, without drama, it withers. But even in death, it gives to the soil, to the seed, to the cycle. Plants are not machines. They are not furniture. They are living poems written in sunlight and water, in molecules and silence. They are storytellers, if you know how to listen. A vine curling toward a trellis is not just growing, it is deciding, sensing, remembering touch. A sunflower tracking the arc of the sun is not just moving, it is measuring time, aligning itself with ancient rhythms. A field of grass bending in the wind is not just pretty, it is conducting an orchestra of resilience. I wonder sometimes what the world sounds like to a plant, not in our sense of sound, but in vibrations, in rhythms, in the tremble of rain on leaf, or the footsteps of a beetle crawling across bark. Does a plant feel the passing of a cloud, the shadow of a bird, the breath of a storm? Science says yes, in a way. They respond to touch, to sound, to the presence of other plants. They recognize kin. They alter their behavior based on memory. It is not thought, perhaps, but it is something astonishingly close. And if they feel the world in these subtle ways, what must they make of us? We who rush past, who prune and pluck, who water and forget and water again. Do they sense our presence? Do they remember the voice that sang to them once in a sunlit room? Do they sigh when we leave? There is still so much we do not know, but perhaps that is part of the beauty. To live in a world where green things stretch upward without needing to understand why. To sleep beside a houseplant and trust that it is weaving oxygen into the night. To rest our eyes on a patch of moss and feel for a moment the ancient softness of being. Tonight, the leaf at my window is lit from behind by the moon. It glows again as it did in my childhood. Not glass, not magic, but something better. A quiet companion, a green mind, a witness to the stillness. And as I breathe slowly, deeply, I wonder if it is breathing with me, not as I do, but in its own green way, its own slow symphony. And somewhere beyond the leaf, beyond the glass, beyond the hush of the room, roots are stirring, stems are lengthening, petals, not yet open, are dreaming of light. The whole world of plants, silent and brilliant, is awake, or perhaps just about to be. If you pressed your palm to the earth and held it there, motionless, for a long, quiet hour, you might begin to sense the slow hum beneath your skin. Not a sound, not a tremble, but something more ancient than either, a feeling, perhaps, that the soil itself is awake. Not in a way that moves or calls attention to itself, but in the way a heartbeat moves through a body at rest. Beneath every forest, every field, every crumbling city sidewalk, there is a hidden world that does not sleep, a world of roots, of whispers, of exploration in darkness. The roots of a plant are its secret self, the part that doesn't show, doesn't blossom, doesn't boast. But oh, how they live. Down there in the cool, damp quiet, they stretch and split and spiral, not blindly, but with intent. There's a myth we tell ourselves that roots simply grow down, obeying gravity like a string drooped from the hand. But plants are more curious than that. They do not just fall into the earth, they navigate it. They feel their way forward, tasting the soil grain by grain, seeking out what is good, avoiding what is not. It is a kind of green spelunking, patient and brilliant. Each root tip is capped with something extraordinary, a kind of helmet made of cells that both protect and perceive. Those tips are the scouts, the diplomats, the foragers. They can sense water from afar, feel the presence of minerals, detect the texture and compactness of the earth. If the soil becomes too hard, the root may grow around it or split to try another root. If it finds a pocket rich with nutrients, it might pause there, branching out like fingers spreading in soft fabric. There is memory here in these decisions, not the kind we write poems about, but memory nonetheless, a molecular remembering, an imprint left by experience. Some roots run deep, anchoring trees like cathedral columns holding up the sky. Others stay shallow, fanning out like lace, quick to drink from the rains that fall. In the desert, roots can sleep for years, brittle and still, until a sudden storm wakes them, and they surge back to life, reaching hungrily for moisture, like a dream that remembers it's real. In the jungle, they dance around rocks, follow rivulets, slip between cracks. They are the green world's most patient architects. But perhaps what is most surprising, what remains the most quietly astonishing, is that roots do not work alone. Beneath the soil, they are not solitary explorers. They are part of a vast interconnected symphony. And at the heart of that symphony is a partnership older than flowers. Enter the fungi, not the mushrooms that pop up after rain, although they are part of the story. But the fungal threads, the hyphae, the impossibly thin filaments that weave themselves through soil like lace, spun by darkness itself. These threads find the roots, or perhaps the roots find them, and when they touch, something beautiful begins. They fuse, they intertwine. They form an alliance that has shaped the surface of the earth for over 400 million years. This is the mycorrhizal network, a mutualism so profound it might be better described as a marriage. The fungus extends the plant's reach, pulling water and phosphorus and nitrogen from places the roots could never reach alone. In return, the plant sends down sugar, sweet fuel made from sunlight, its most precious gift. Together they thrive. Together they build forests. But the network doesn't stop there. The hyphae connect not just one plant, but many. A forest, seen from below, is a web of shimmering threads, root to root to root, joined by fungus, passing signals and sustenance across species, across seasons. Trees talk in their own way. A birch can feed a fir. A mother tree, older, wiser, vast, can send carbon to her saplings, and when a tree is attacked by beetles, by blight, she can send a chemical warning through the network, a silent alarm that travels underground faster than any whisper through the air. Imagine that. A forest that speaks without sound, that listens without ears, that remembers through chemistry and mycelium. It is not a fairy tale. It is not fiction. It is the secret infrastructure of life on Earth. And still, all of it is quiet. Still, all of it is unseen. When you walk in the woods, you tread above this world, the tangled, delicate lace of connection, just inches below your feet. Every footprint brushes the surface of something infinitely old and still evolving. Beneath the moss, beneath the leaf litter, beneath the worms and the beetles and the stone, the network waits and pulses and shares. It is as close to a nervous system as plants may ever come. It is as close to magic as science dares whisper. Not every plant joins the network. Some, like the clever orchid, take but do not give, freeloaders on the fungal train. Others have specialized roots, swollen and curled, that harbor bacteria capable of fixing nitrogen from the air, offering the plant its own private supply of fertilizer. Peas, beans, acacias, they've made their own arrangements. The underground world, like ours, is filled with alliances, rivalries, strange detentes. But even in their solitude, roots are never passive. They secrete compounds into the soil, shaping their surroundings like potters at a wheel. Some of these chemicals attract friendly microbes, others repel invaders or suppress competitors. In this way, a plant sculpts its own microclimate, a little aura of influence that protects and nourishes. It is the equivalent of a neighborhood, complete with welcome mats and fences. And the soil itself is alive, not just as a substrate, not just as a place to stand, but as a community of its own, billions upon billions of bacteria, fungi, archaea, nematodes, microfauna. Each handful of earth is a city of the unseen, and the roots are its residents, its tenders, its bridge between worlds. There are trees in the Amazon that root shallow but wide, spreading like arms to gather every droplet of fleeting rain. There are mangroves that grow in salt water, their roots arching above the surface like dancers mid-leap. There are alpine plants that cling to crevices, their roots threading through ice and stone, gentle but insistent. Every root system tells a story. Every story begins with listening, and the roots do listen to the sounds of water, to the echoes of their own kind. In recent years, scientists have found that roots can grow toward the vibration of running water, even when no moisture is present. Somehow they hear, not with ears, but with their cells, not sound as we know it, but vibration, a frequency they seem to understand. In darkness, they orient, they decide. And if they can sense water, might they also sense each other? There's evidence growing still that plants can recognize their kin, that roots growing near siblings are less aggressive, more willing to share, that strangers spark competition. It is not consciousness, perhaps, but it is something, something more than chance, something like recognition. Tonight, as you lie still and your breath finds its rhythm, there are roots beneath you, perhaps not close, perhaps not yet, but somewhere nearby, twining through the soil, unfolding through their quiet tasks. They are listening. They are feeling their way forward. They are building the world beneath the world, slowly, always, without applause. And while we sleep, they do not. The root never stops reaching, never stops weaving, never stops growing in the direction of more water, more stability, more understanding. It is a kind of hope. It is a kind of wisdom. Above, the leaves may tremble in the breeze. Above, the branches may sway and bloom and fall. But below, always below, the roots remain, searching, singing, and somewhere in that dark and fertile tangle, the first notes of something beautiful are forming, something old and soft and terribly alive. If you listen not with your ears, but with your breath, slowly, gently, as though leaning into the rhythm of the earth itself, you may begin to sense it, a presence, not a mind like ours, not a consciousness full of chatter and narrative, but something quieter, more diffused, a green kind of awareness, spread like mist through every stem and root, every leaf and shoot, a whisper stitched through cells like golden thread in old cloth. This is what some scientists now call distributed intelligence, a way of knowing the world without a brain, a way of making decisions without a center. And plants have been doing it for hundreds of millions of years. To be intelligent, we used to think, meant to think like us. But slowly, gently, plants have been teaching us otherwise. There is a pea plant in a pot, leaning slightly toward a wooden stake. You might think it's simple habit. Plants always grow towards support. But the moment the stake is moved, the plant hesitates. It redirects. It remembers. And when offered two supports, one close and weak, the other far and strong, the plant pauses as though weighing its options, then chooses, not the nearest, but the better. This is not reflex. This is evaluation. But how, without neurons, does a plant decide? The secret lies in chemistry, in subtle flows of signal molecules that pass through cell walls like messages down a long green corridor. Hormones like auxin guide growth, bending the plant toward light or around obstacles. Electrical impulses, faint but real, ripple through cells when leaves are touched, when roots are wounded, when sunlight shifts. A wounded leaf can send a warning to its neighbors. A shaded branch can ask for more sugar. A root, encountering salt, can send an alarm that reshapes the whole body. Imagine a system with no headquarters, no conductor, yet it works. Like a village where every house communicates with its neighbors, adjusting, responding, shifting with grace. The mimosa pudica, often called the sensitive plant, folds its leaves when touched, not gradually, not lazily, but with sudden resolve, as though startled. Once, this was thought to be a mere reflex. But when mimosa plants were dropped from short heights, gently without harm, they folded their leaves at first, then slowly stopped reacting. They had learned that the stimulus posed no threat. Even weeks later, the memory held. They did not respond to the same drop, though they still flinched at new sensations. A plant that remembers, a plant that learns. This isn't memory as we know it. No scenes, no faces, no stories. But it is memory nonetheless, a kind of molecular imprint that shapes future response. It is the way green bodies think, and they do think in their own way. They solve problems. Roots avoid obstacles, even before touching them, bending in anticipation. Leaves adjust their angles throughout the day, tracking the sun not by habit but by internal clock. A sunflower does not guess. It knows when the morning will come. Inside the cells, there are organelles that keep time, circadian rhythms that pulse like a heartbeat, slow and steady. These clocks regulate when to open stomata, when to make sugar, when to bloom. Even in darkness, they persist. If you hide a plant away from sunlight, it will still move with the memory of light, opening and closing in time, with a world it no longer sees. It remembers the sun, and plants can listen, not to song, not to speech, but to vibration. Roots grow toward the sound of running water, even when there is no moisture present. Leaves have been shown to react differently to recordings of chewing caterpillars than to wind or silence. Somehow the plant distinguishes threat from breeze. Somehow it hears with its skin. Sound is vibration, and plants are tuned to it. Their cells respond to frequency, to rhythm, to pressure. The world is full of tiny pulses, and plants are always listening. But their intelligence is not just in reaction, it is also in anticipation. Some desert plants begin altering their internal chemistry before the dry season comes, preparing for drought that has not yet arrived. Certain grasses increase their defenses before grazing animals return. They are not predicting in our sense, no images of future events, but their bodies have learned from patterns, from seasons, from the language of time written into wind and rain. This is not the intelligence of a single self. It is not centered in a head or heart. It is distributed, spread like dew across every inch of tissue. Every leaf is a sensor. Every root is a decision maker. Every cell holds a part of the whole. And perhaps this is why plants are so resilient. If an animal is wounded in the brain, the body may falter, but a plant can lose half of itself and still regrow. It can be cut, broken, burned, and still come back, because no one part holds the secret. The secret is everywhere. Intelligence is everywhere. Life is everywhere. Even climbing plants, like morning glory or grapevine, use their intelligence to feel. Their tendrils reach and twist, testing space. When they touch a surface, they pause, evaluating thickness of flexibility. Then they wrap, slow and sure, securing themselves for the next stage of growth. If the surface is unsuitable, they let go, retreat, try again. It is not trial and error. It is discernment. Inside the plant, chemical messengers speak in silence. Auxins tell cells to grow. Cytokinins tell them to divide. Gibberellins encourage elongation. Abscisic acid says, wait. And ethylene, sweet and volatile, ripens fruit, softens leaves, helps flowers wilt, and seeds scatter. It is a constant conversation, hormones humming like bees through vascular corridors. And still, the plant makes no sound. It changes. It adjusts. It learns. But it never shouts. There is a kind of wisdom in that, a refusal to rush, to push, to dominate. Instead, plants meet the world with responsiveness. They do not run from the cold. They alter their chemistry. They do not hide from drought. They sculpt themselves to survive. Each response is elegant, efficient, intimate. In this way, Plants are philosophers of presence. They do not dwell on what has passed, nor chase what is not yet here. They remain rooted in the now, even as they reach toward what comes next. They do not seek control, they seek balance, and in doing so, they thrive. The term green intelligence might sound poetic, even fanciful, but perhaps it is the most accurate description we have. Intelligence that is not noisy or centralized or self important, but quiet, shared, subtle, and persistent. It is the wisdom of being in place, the wisdom of listening more than speaking, the wisdom of knowing what to do without needing to ask why. Tonight, as the room settles into its own quiet breathing, there may be a houseplant nearby, or a tree outside the window, or just a blade of grass swaying unseen. And though it makes no sound, it is aware of you, of the air, of the moisture on your breath, of the heat of your body. It does not think in words. It does not know your name, but it knows that something has entered its space, and that is enough. It will not move, it will not speak, but it will adjust ever so slightly. A pore may widen, a hormone may shift, a root may twitch in the soil, and tomorrow, imperceptibly, it will grow in a new direction. And so the forest, the field, the garden, and even the pot beside the bed become places of quiet intelligence, not waiting to be tamed, not asking to be studied, but simply being, patiently, brilliantly alive. It begins not with a sound, but with a scent, faint, damp, earthy, the kind that rises after rain, the kind that makes the world feel older and softer and closer to the skin. Beneath our feet, beneath the mulch and moss and crumbling leaves, there is a living lacework hidden in the dark, a slow, branching network spun from threads finer than silk, connecting root to root, tree to tree, in a communion so quiet that for centuries no one knew it was there. But the forest did. The forest always knew. They call it the mycorrhizal network, but I think of it as the silent symphony, a symphony where the instruments are made of fungus and root, and the notes are sugar and signal and memory. Here in the soil's dim cathedral, plants are not alone. They are joined by an ancient ally, fungi not as mushrooms, not as mold, but as filaments, hyphae so thin you could stack 1,000 and still not match the width of a hair. And yet they reach farther than any root, farther than any limb, drawing lines of connection across the earth's soft underbelly. A single tree, even one that looks lonely on a hill, may be in contact with dozens of others, all invisible to the eye. Through these fungal threads, it sends and receives nutrients, yes, but also information. A warning here, a gift there, a shift in the air, a memory of drought, a whisper of decay. When a sapling is shaded and cannot make enough sugar, an older tree may send help, carbon passed down the line like a bowl of soup slid across a quiet table. When one tree is attacked by beetles, it alerts the others, and they, in turn, prepare, altering their chemistry, thickening their bark, calling in insect allies. It is not a scream. It is not panic. It is preparation. It is cooperation without negotiation. There are trees they call mother trees, not because they gave literal birth to the saplings around them, but because their presence anchors the forest. Their roots are vast. Their networks are old. They support, they share, they connect. And when they begin to die, they send one last message to the soil, a gift of sugars, a parting sigh of phosphorus. Nothing is hoarded. Everything is passed on. To think of a forest in this way, not as a collection of trees, but as a family, a community, a breathing, sharing organism, is to rethink what it means to be alive. It is to see that cooperation does not require a face, that generosity can flow without recognition, that even in the dark, even underground, there is kindness. And the fungi, those quiet architects, ask for so little in return. A share of the sugar, that's all. They give so much: water drawn from faraway crevices, minerals unlocked from stone, and for their service they are fed. A fair trade, an ancient pact. This partnership is older than flowers. It began in the oceans, when the first algae brushed up against microbial fungi, and something new was born, the first steps onto land. Fungi were there at the beginning, and they never left. They are the forest's bloodstream, the earth's long memory. When we step into a grove of pine or birch or oak, we are stepping into a mind larger than any one plant, a mind made of many parts. And it does not stop at trees, even grasses, even herbs, even that dandelion cracking the sidewalk may be part of this whispering underground. The extent may vary. Some plants plug in deeply, some only lightly, and some, the ones who cheat, who take but do not give, still find their way into the network's edges. But the web remains, adapting, growing, and changing, always alive. And sometimes, at the surface, we get a glimpse. A ring of mushrooms after rain, perfectly spaced, not magic, but a signal of the vast fungal circle beneath. The sudden bloom of fruiting bodies after months of silence, the gentle decay of wood, softened by fungal enzymes, returning to the soil what once stood tall. Even rot is a kind of recycling. Even decay is part of the conversation. There are some who believe that fungi are the oldest communicators on Earth, that their networks inspired the roots, that they taught plants how to listen, how to share, how to be many things at once. And maybe that's why, when you walk through a forest at dusk, it feels not empty, but attentive, as though something is listening, as though something knows you're there. Perhaps it's the trees, perhaps it's the fungi, perhaps it's the bond between them, woven so finely that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. If you were to sit very still in the middle of a glade, no phone, no shoes, just you and the moss and the darkening light, you might begin to feel it. A kind of hum, not sound, not exactly, but presence, connection, as if the ground beneath you were breathing through 1,000 invisible lungs, as if the silence were full of conversation, and in that moment, something might shift inside you. The idea that to be alone is the default might fall away, because here, in the deep green stillness, nothing is truly alone. Every tree is a signal tower, every fungus is a wire, every root a question, every hypha an answer. The plants, so often dismissed as passive, are in fact intricately connected to each other, to fungi, to time, to place. Their intelligence is not just internal, it is shared, it is social, and it happens beneath our notice. They say we need connection, that we wither without it. But plants have always known this. They have never forgotten that to survive is not only to grow, but to grow together. And while we move through our days with notifications and messages and wires, the forest speaks in minerals, in sugars, in silence. Tonight, while cities hum and satellites blink and screens glow coldly in the dark, the forest is sharing, tree to tree, leaf to root, fungus to fern. And though no one is watching, it continues. Because this is how the world remembers itself, not in noise, but in network, not in speed, but in stillness. Somewhere, a birch is feeding her young. Somewhere, an old stump is sending its last signal. Somewhere, far below where the footfalls echo, the world is touching itself, quietly, endlessly, in threads finer than we will ever see. And just above that, the plants reach upward as always, but never without their roots in the web, never without their feet in the story, never alone. There is a softness to morning light, the kind that settles gently across windowsills and leaves and half slept thoughts. It pours in not like a flood, but like a warm breath, filling the air with gold and the promise of waking. And in that golden hush, something stirs that has been waiting all through the night. Leaves open like tiny solar sails, blades tilt toward the east, and deep within each cell, the silent miracle of life's energy begins again. The green factories awaken, though they do not look like factories at all. They look like peace, photosynthesis. The word itself feels almost too mechanical for what it truly is. It is not just a chemical reaction, it is alchemy, a green enchantment, the art of turning sunlight, light, into sugar, into energy, into the very substance that fuels forests and feeds fields and grows gardens. It is the closest thing to magic the natural world allows to be real, and it happens quietly, persistently, in the soft interiors of leaves. Inside each leaf are tiny rooms, cells, full of chloroplasts, which themselves contain chlorophyll, that pigment that drinks in light like poetry. When the sun's rays hit a leaf, photons bounce and dance, and chlorophyll catches them, holds them, turns them into energy. Not all light is taken, only the most useful, the reds and the blues. The greens are reflected, which is why leaves appear the way they do, not because they are green by nature, but because they give that color back to the world. And within that captured light is the power to split water, H2O pulled from the soil by thirsty roots. And with that energy, the plant rearranges atoms. Carbon dioxide, pulled from the breath of the air, meets water in a molecular embrace, and together, under the spell of sunlight, they become glucose, sugar, and oxygen. A simple formula, a cosmic recipe. Sunlight plus water plus air, your life. But formulas do not capture the beauty of it. They do not tell you how quietly a leaf trembles when the light touches it. They do not describe the hum of a sunflower field at dawn, each petal tuned to the sun's frequency. They do not convey the silent generosity of a tree giving away oxygen with every breath, asking for nothing in return but space and time and a bit of carbon to hold. Every breath you take is a gift from a leaf. The air is richer because of plants. They exhale what we need. We exhale what they need. It is a perfect exchange, an elegant agreement whispered across species and epochs. And yet, they do not make oxygen for us. They do not know we exist. They do this because it is their way of being, their way of unfolding, of building bodies from light and gas and earth. If the world were quiet enough, perhaps we could hear them weaving it together. A field of wheat, waving in the breeze, is not just a landscape. It is a million tiny suns, each leaf turning solar light into sustenance. A single oak tree in summer might make enough oxygen to keep two human beings breathing, day and night. And beneath the ocean's surface, the algae, those unassuming green and brown drifters, produce more than half of the world's oxygen. The breath of the sea, the sigh of the deep. Even the plants we rarely notice are working. Mosses on rooftops, lichens on stone, grass between sidewalk cracks, all of them quietly photosynthesizing, even in hard places, even in unlikely places. They do not demand attention, they simply continue. And what they make, sugar, is not just for themselves. It becomes nectar, fruit, seed. It moves through phloem like syrup, through a capillary network, feeding the hungry mouths of roots and buds, flowers and stems. It is stored, spent, shared. A leaf makes sugar, not just to live, but to give. And this gift of sugar is what powers the world. Every animal, every insect, every human story is rooted, quite literally, in the photosynthetic generosity of plants. We eat them, or we eat the things that eat them. We wear them, build with them, brew them into morning rituals. Every breath, every step, every thought is carried on the back of a plant's quiet labor. And yet we rarely thank them. Perhaps that's because they ask for so little. No eyes to meet, no arms to wave, just a patch of soil, a stretch of sky. Just the freedom to stand still and do what they've always done, turn light into life. In tropical rainforests, where sunlight is a rare currency beneath the canopy, leaves grow large and thin, reaching sideways for a sliver of brightness. In alpine meadows, where the sun is sharp but the season short, flowers bloom all at once, racing to sip the solar energy before the frost returns. In deserts, some plants open their stomata only at night, storing carbon dioxide until daybreak, when photosynthesis can happen without losing precious water. Each strategy is different, each is perfect, each is a love letter to the sun, written in green, and the sun responds, always. We forget that light is ancient, that the photons reaching a leaf today were born in the heart of the sun hundreds of thousands of years ago, before traveling through space in just over 8 minutes to arrive here, to fall on a petal, to strike a blade of grass, to set in motion the oldest dance on earth. The plant does not need to know this, it just waits. And when the light comes, it opens. There is something holy in that. Even now, as night folds around the world, as windows glow and lamps flicker, and sleep tugs gently at your limbs, plants are still preparing. Some flowers close their petals in the dark, folding into themselves like sighs. Some leaves droop, slowing their metabolism. But deep inside, in their chloroplasts and mitochondria, the work of life continues. Sugars made during the day are now burned slowly, fueling the slow repair of cells, the steady stretch of stems, the dreamlike weaving of new leaves. And when the morning comes, the whole green world will breathe in again. There is no vanity in photosynthesis, no audience, no applause, just quiet purpose, just the daily work of turning light into sweetness, of making the invisible visible, of feeding a planet. And as we lie here, still and soft, held by the hush of night, the plants are already preparing. Somewhere, a leaf is turning slightly in anticipation. Somewhere, a chloroplast is waiting to catch the next photon. Somewhere, sugar is being made, quietly, perfectly, again. There is an elegance to the way a leaf unfurls, a kind of origami the universe taught itself. Not sudden, not showy, but with the patience of lights filtering through water. If you've ever watched a tendril find its way up a railing or a sprout push through a crack in stone, you've witnessed something that feels less like growth and more like choreography. Plants do not simply grow, they compose themselves. They sculpt, they shape, they whisper geometry into being. Each plant wears its story on its skin, in the curve of a petal, the twist of a stem, the spread of its canopy. Form in the plant world is never an accident. Every angle, every thickness, every spiral is a memory of environment, a record of compromise, a solution to a problem as old as the wind. It is evolution written not in DNA alone, but in silhouette. A cactus, for instance, tells you everything you need to know just by standing there. Its skin is thick and waxy, a shield against thirst. Its spines, not mere protection, but leaves folded into themselves, reducing surface area to avoid losing water. The body swells with moisture after rain and shrinks with drought, pulsing like a lung made of desert time. It is a plant that has learned how to wait, how to survive in silence. Meanwhile, the fern, ancient and feathered, unrolls its fronds in tight spirals called fiddleheads, not because it plays music, but because it has rhythm in its veins. Ferns remember the age before flowers, before bees, before the humming chorus of pollination. They carry spores instead of seeds, scatter dust instead of fruit, and still they flourish. In shady corners, on stone walls, in the damp breath of waterfalls, wherever persistence is more important than bloom. The climbing vine, that quiet acrobat, grows not toward the sun directly, but toward structure. It sends out feelers, tendrils, soft hands reaching through space. When they touch something, a fence post, a branch, a hint of support, they curl slowly at first, then tighter, pulling the rest of the plant upward in a spiral of faith. No one teaches it to do this. It just does. It has learned to borrow height from others. It has made trust its strategy. And then there are plants that hide their growth underground. Bulbs, rhizomes, tubers, all thick with stored energy. The potato, the onion, the lotus root, each a vault of starch and sugar, sleeping until conditions are right. These are the hoarders, the hibernators. They know that survival sometimes means disappearing for a while, that not all growth is visible, that sometimes to thrive you must be still. Leaves themselves tell entire novels in their shapes, broad and flat in shady forests where every bit of light matters, narrow and curled in dry lands where moisture must be hoarded like treasure, waxy in the tropics where rain must roll off like tears, fuzzy on mountaintops where wind bites and light burns. Some are serrated like knives, some are lobed like little green lungs, some so perfectly symmetrical they seem drawn by compass. Each leaf is a solution, a compromise, a declaration. This is who I became to live here. The Venus flytrap became teeth, the pitcher plant became a chalice, the bladderwort became invisible snares, swimming in ponds. These are not tricks, these are adaptations. Insectivorous plants, born of poor soil, found another way to feed, not just through roots and light, but by hunting, slowly, patiently. The plant world does not lack imagination, even color speaks. A red leaf may signal youth, or protection from intense sunlight, or the presence of anthocyanins, pigments that reflect damaging light and protect the fragile green within. Variegated plants, those with patches of white or yellow, are mosaics of light and shadow, not flaws but features. Albino redwoods, pale as ghosts, live as parasites off their green relatives, feeding off shared roots, surviving as pale memories of their kin. Some plants grow flat and tight to the ground, hugging the earth to avoid cold wind. Others grow tall and sparse exposing only what they must. Alpine cushion plants form dense, rounded mats to hold warmth, to resist ice, to persist. Tropical plants may split their leaves to let wind pass through without tearing. Wetland plants evolve aerenchyma, air-filled tissues that let their roots breathe even underwater. The whole plant world is a theater of necessity, and still there is beauty. That's what makes it so extraordinary. That evolution, for all its utility, leaves room for elegance, for whimsy, for bloom. The sunflower doesn't need to face the sun, but it does, tracking light through the day like a slow motion compass. The Fibonacci spirals and pine cones and daisies aren't just efficient, they're breathtaking. The symmetry of maple leaves, the fractals in Romanesco broccoli, the delicate bells of lily of the valley, none of these are necessary in the brutal sense. But they happen anyway. Order appears, pattern persists. The universe cannot help itself. And we, wandering through gardens and forests and fields, feel that without always knowing why. We feel calmer in places with plants, not just because they give us oxygen, but because their forms speak to something inside us. Their spirals echo our own. Their patterns soothe our scattered thoughts. Their patience steadies our breath. Perhaps it is because their shapes are honest. Nothing is hidden. A plant cannot pretend to be what it is not. It cannot shrink its thorns out of shame. It cannot unfurl faster than time allows. It wears its history openly, in leaf and stem and bark. Its failures become compost. Its successes become seeds. Somewhere tonight, a moonflower is beginning to bloom, not because it wants to be seen, but because the moon is rising, and the night is warm, and the moths will soon be out. Somewhere, a succulent is holding tight to its water, waiting for a week without rain. Somewhere, a banyan tree is dropping its aerial roots toward the ground, slowly becoming a forest of one. And all across the world, plants are growing into shapes we could never design, yet which feel like home, shapes that tell of wind and drought, of shade and fire, of grazing teeth and giving rain. Shapes that are answers on answers we did not know we were asking. To watch a plant is to watch a sculpture that sculpts itself. To know a plant is to know a survivor. To live with plants is to live in the company of the quietly brilliant. And if you fall asleep tonight with one near your bed, know that it is still shaping itself, even in the dark. The curve of a new leaf, the lengthening of a stem, the thickening of roots, all of it deliberate, all of it slow, all of it beautiful in the way only truth can be. If you were to walk through a quiet garden at dawn, before the birds begin their chatter, before the first breeze stirs the leaves, you might begin to sense it, that strange stillness that isn't quite silent, a hush so thick it feels like listening. And if you were very still, very present, you might wonder, are the plants listening too? It's a curious thought, and for a long time we would have dismissed it. Listening requires ears, we used to say. But plants have no ears, no drums, no cochlea, so they must be deaf to the world's vibrations, mute to its murmurs. And yet, time and again, they prove otherwise, not with noise, but with nuance. When a caterpillar begins chewing on a leaf, not in a frenzy, not in a rage, but with the casual persistence of hunger, something in the plant shifts, not just at the wound, but across the body. A chemical alarm is triggered. Defenses go up. Bitter compounds are produced. Proteins unroll like tiny shields. But more than that, If that same leaf hears the sound of chewing, a recording, a vibration mimicking the real thing, the response begins even before the damage is done. It is as if the plant knows, not through logic, not through thought, but through sensation. Plants, it turns out, can detect vibrations. Not just any vibration, but meaningful ones, those that matter for survival. They feel with their cells what we hear with our bones. Their whole body is a tympanic field, sensitive to tremor, tuned to the whispers of their environment. Roots, nestled in the dark soil, grow toward the sound of running water, even when no moisture is detectable. Somehow they perceive the frequency, the rhythm of that subterranean flow. They follow not scent, not sight, but song, the deep, pulsing music of water moving through stone. It isn't magic, it is mechanoreception, the ability to detect mechanical pressure, like touch, stretch, or movement. But in plants, it is spread across every surface. Every cell is a fingertip, every stem a listening post, and what they hear shapes them. A vine brushed repeatedly on one side will grow in another direction. A leaf stroked by wind will become thicker, more resilient. The more a plant is touched, the more compact and sturdy it becomes. It is not damaged by affection, it is shaped by it. Gardeners have always known this, even without understanding why. Plants respond to touch, to presence, to vibration. In the rainforests, there are trees that bloom only when lightning strikes nearby, responding not to the fire or the light, but to the low frequency rumbles that echo through the ground. In deserts, some plants begin their growth cycle after the rhythmic patter of a specific rainfall. It's not the water that triggers them, it's the sound of it arriving. Even flowers, those soft lipped solar instruments, may be tuned to the buzz of bees. In some species, nectar becomes sweeter when pollinators are near, as if the plant, recognizing the wing beat, decides to sweeten the deal. A form of gratitude, perhaps, or simply strategy. Either way, it is responsive. It is alive. And then there are the shy ones. The mimosa, folding its leaves at the slightest brush. The sundew, curling its sticky tentacles around an unsuspecting fly. The touch-me-not, flinching from contact like a startled dream. These movements are not passive. They are deliberate responses to touch, an awareness without eyes, a choice without thought. Plants do not have brains, and yet they remember. They do not have ears, and yet they listen. They do not have mouths, and yet they speak, through scent, through chemistry, through vibration. A leaf under attack sends airborne signals to its neighbors. Prepare. A root in dry soil secretes abscisic acid, telling the rest of the plant to conserve water. A tree, grazed by deer, may release tannins that make its leaves bitter, and its neighbors, receiving the message, do the same. It is a chorus of responses, a field-wide murmur, a community attuned to itself. To enter such a world is to reimagine intelligence, not as a centralized authority issuing commands, but as a distributed field of sensing and reacting, a million tiny decisions made in real time by a body that knows how to listen to itself. The listening garden is not a place, but a state of mind. It is the understanding that plants are always tuned to their surroundings, that every rustle matters, that every footstep carries weight, that the world is full of signals and someone is always receiving them. And perhaps we are part of that too. When you stand beneath a tree and exhale, The carbon in your breath enters the leaves. When you speak softly to a plant, the vibrations ripple through its tissues. When you play music in a greenhouse, some plants grow faster, bloom earlier. Not because they like Mozart, perhaps, but because they feel the pulse. They sense the presence. They adjust to the rhythm of the world around them. This is not myth. It is not whimsy. It is science, softened, yes, by metaphor, but rooted in reality. The plants are listening, not in the way we do, not for words or melodies, but for patterns, for tremors, for meaning woven into frequency. And through that, they navigate a world without movement, a life without eyes. They grow toward what they need. They defend what they love. They open when the time is right. And maybe, just maybe, they hear us too. Not as we think of hearing, but as a kind of presence, a vibration, a nearness. So tonight, if you find yourself brushing past a leaf on your way to bed, or sitting near a potted friend as you sip your tea, imagine, just for a moment, that you are not alone, that you are part of the world's vibration, that your breath, your voice, your warmth is felt in the soft green silence. The garden is always listening, not for answers, but for life. The wind moves through a meadow like a messenger, not rushing, not loud, but steady, sure, soft in its insistence. It carries more than air. It carries scent. It carries intention. It carries the secret language of plants. To walk through a field at dusk among wildflowers and grasses is to walk through a space alive with conversation. You cannot hear it, not in the way we understand sound, but your skin feels it, your breath takes it in. Invisible letters written in molecules drift from leaf to leaf, from stem to sky. This is the language of leaves, and it is always being spoken. Plants talk with chemicals, not randomly, not accidentally, but precisely, even poetically. When a plant is nibbled by an insect, it sends out a chemical signal, not just within itself, but into the air. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs, are released like smoke signals, alerting nearby kin. I'm under attack, it says. Prepare yourselves. And they do. Neighboring plants begin producing defensive chemicals, changing their internal chemistry, hardening their tissues, even summoning allies. A corn plant under siege by caterpillars can release a scent that attracts parasitic wasps, tiny airborne knights who lay their eggs in the invaders. The plant doesn't cry for help. It broadcasts it. It's not just a warning system, it's a conversation. Acacias in the savannas of Africa famously release ethylene gas when grazed by antelope. The gas drifts downwind, and other acacias, catching the signal, begin pumping tannins into their leaves, making them unpalatable. Some even become toxic. The antelope learn to eat against the wind. In the dense understories of rainforests, where light is scarce and competition fierce, some plants use allelopathy, releasing chemical compounds into the soil to suppress the growth of competitors. It's not malice, it's strategy, a kind of botanical boundary setting, a way of saying, this is my patch of sunlight, I need it to survive. Even within the same plant, signals flow constantly. When light touches one leaf, it can trigger changes across the entire canopy. If roots find dry soil, they send hormones upward, urging the stomata in the leaves to close, preserving water. It is coordination without a conductor, communication without words. Each molecule is a message. Each scent is a signal. To us, these smells may be faint. The grassy sharpness of a lawn just mowed, the sweetness of crushed mint, the peppery sting of arugula. But to plants, these are voices. Some call them green pheromones, though they lack the drama of animal scent. These are subtler, layered, nuanced, refined over millions of years, a kind of chemical poetry. And then there are the flowers. Ah, the flowers. If leaves speak in whispers, flowers sing in perfume. Their scents are invitations, tailored for the noses of pollinators. Some flowers release fragrance only at night, drawing in moths with the promise of nectar wrapped in moonlight. Others open in the morning, their smell carried on the warm breath of the sun, luring bees and butterflies. Each scent has a purpose. Each note is meant to be heard. Even color is part of the language. Ultraviolet patterns invisible to human eyes guide bees like runway lights. A sunflower may seem plain yellow to us, but to a bee, it glows with concentric rings of instruction. Land here, drink here, carry this pollen there. And some flowers go further still. The carrion flower, for instance, smells not sweet but foul, like rotting meat, to attract flies. It doesn't waste time on the wrong audience. The language of plants is precise, always. And yet, these messages are not rigid. They change with context. A tomato plant in rich soil may emit a different blend of VOCs than one under stress. A tree injured by storm may shift its chemical bouquet, altering not just its scent, but how it is perceived by insects, fungi, even other trees. It is a form of adaptation, a fluid, living language. There are stories, quiet ones, built from observation, of plants recognizing the voices of their own kin, that they adjust their growth depending on whether a neighbor is a relative or a stranger, that their chemical signals are received more clearly by siblings. It's as if, in a crowded room of green, they know who they are speaking to. And it doesn't stop at survival. Some researchers have found that plants near each other, even without visible contact, can synchronize their flowering. The chemical cues in the air can trigger a cascade of blooming, a soft green chorus of petals and pollen. Not because it is planned, but because it is shared. There is no grammar, no syntax, only presence, response, resonance. But it is still language. It is still meaning passed from one to another, and perhaps, sometimes, to us as well. The scent of lavender calms us, the smell of pine sharpens the mind, the fragrance of jasmine soothes, while basil invigorates. These are not accidents. These molecules are not crafted for us, but we have evolved within their presence. We are attuned to their messages, even if we no longer hear the words. And if we are quiet, if we let go of our need for explanation, we might begin to sense it, the way a leaf rustles differently when you approach, the way a forest smells different after rain, the way a flower turns not just to the sun, but to the sound of footsteps. None of it asks for attention. All of it communicates. Somewhere tonight, a basil plant is releasing a little more linalool into the air, just enough to deter a wandering pest. Somewhere, a wild tobacco plant is switching pollinators, changing its flower shape and scent after being nibbled too often by hawk moth larvae. Somewhere, in the windless air of a greenhouse, tomato plants are talking to each other, quietly coordinating their defenses in a language of volatile whispers. And still, they grow. Still, they bloom. Still, they speak. You don't need to understand the language to feel it. All you need is to slow down, to breathe in the air around you and remember, It is not empty. It is full of stories, green, fragrant, unspoken, floating on the breeze, waiting to be heard. There's a strange kind of quiet in the way plants defend themselves. No snarling, no stingers, no chase across an open plain. But don't let the stillness fool you. A plant, when threatened, doesn't run. It transforms, it sharpens, it speaks in chemistry, in camouflage, in cleverness. To be rooted is not to be helpless, it is to become the battlefield. If you were to pluck a leaf from a wild mustard plant, you'd release a sharp, peppery tang into the air that is glucosinolate, a chemical designed not for flavor, but for deterrence. It's a message, not for you exactly, but for any creature thinking of nibbling too deeply. This will not be pleasant. And beneath that leaf, in the tissue you cannot see, the plant is already adjusting. Wounded, it begins producing more defenses, faster and stronger. The response is not slow. It is swift, calculated, sometimes localized, sometimes systemic, and always tailored to the nature of the threat. A plant knows the difference between a grazing herbivore and a slicing insect, between one that comes to eat and one that comes to lay eggs. And it doesn't just respond, it anticipates. In some cases, it even retaliates. The wild tobacco plant, for instance, has become a strategist of scent and schedule. If one of its common pollinators, a hawk moth, begins laying eggs that hatch into ravenous caterpillars, the plant doesn't waste time complaining. It changes the timing of its flower opening, switching pollinators entirely, from night-flying moths to day-flying hummingbirds. Just like that, the plant steps out of harm's way, a schedule rewritten, a risk rerouted. And then there's the acacia, a tree so well armored that it practically bristles with readiness. Its branches are studded with long, needle-like thorns, but even that is not enough. Hidden within the hollows of those thorns are tiny ants, not prisoners, but allies. The acacia feeds them with sugary nectar, even offers specialized leaf tips as homes, and in return, the ants patrol the tree with soldierly resolve, biting and stinging anything that dares draw near. The tree doesn't just defend itself, it hires help. Some plants produce latex, thick, sticky, sometimes toxic sap that clogs the mouths of herbivores and seals wounds like botanical bandages. Others rely on sheer bitterness. Alkaloids like caffeine and nicotine, the very substances we cherish for their buzz and sharpness, began as plant defenses. Their bitterness, their toxicity in large amounts, is a chemical no thank you, a warning written into flavor. Still others use deception. The passion flower, for example, produces tiny yellow nodules on its leaves that look remarkably like butterfly eggs. Female butterflies, not wanting to overcrowd a food source for their young, are tricked into laying eggs elsewhere. The leaf remains untouched, having mimicked the sign of being already claimed. And in South Africa, the carrion flower takes deception to operatic heights. It doesn't attract pollinators with sweetness or color. It lures them with illusion, a scent like rotting meat, petals marbled like flesh, a warmth that mimics decay. Flies come, fooled into thinking they've found the perfect spot to lay eggs. They leave carrying pollen, deceived but useful. Not all plants go on the offensive. Some retreat, fold, curl into themselves. The sensitive plant closes its leaves at the slightest touch, collapsing like a stage curtain, not to hide, but to startle, to say in movement, I am not what you think. This folding takes energy, but it works. Grazers often avoid plants that behave unpredictably. Others protect with armor. The thick hide of a saguaro cactus, ribbed and ridged, shields the precious water inside. The fine hairs of a lamb's ear leaf make it unpalatable, a texture lesson in distaste. The tough linen of bark, the sharp edges of holly, all of them layers, all of them language. And then there is poison. The castor bean plant, source of ricin, holds one of the most potent natural toxins known. The foxglove, with its deadly digitalis. The hemlock that brought Socrates his final silence. These are plants that learned long ago that being lovely and being lethal are not opposites. That defense need not announce itself. Sometimes it just waits. But even poison has purpose. A small dose can deter. A precise chemical balance can guide evolution. Some butterflies have adapted to toxic milkweed, storing the poison in their own bodies to make themselves unappetizing to birds. What began as a plant defense becomes a strategy shared across kingdoms. And still, in the midst of all this quiet warfare, there is tenderness. Many plants know their attackers, know them deeply. Some can distinguish between species of caterpillar based on saliva. Others adjust their response depending on whether the damage is caused by wind or teeth. This is not panic. This is discernment. This is the plant listening to its body, interpreting the world not with nerves, but with chemistry. What's more astonishing is how specific these defenses can be. A wild tomato plant, faced with drought and insect stress, will not merely shut down or ramp up every function. It will shift its metabolic pathways, reroute resources, time its flowering differently, even communicate these changes through the soil to its neighbors via shared mycorrhizal networks. Defense becomes not just self-preservation, but community strategy. And perhaps that is the lesson, that being still does not mean being passive, that silence can be full of strategy, that rootedness is not weakness, but resolve. When we think of strength, we often picture motion, claws, speed, growl. But plants have a different vocabulary. Their strength is in resilience, in adaptation, in the patient study of their attackers. They do not react in haste, they respond in wisdom, and sometimes they invite danger just to know it better. There are plants that allow minor pests to feed on them, knowing that the damage will summon greater predators. There are flowers that mimic the distress sense of other plants to preempt attacks. There are species that bloom only after fire, their seeds sealed in resin, waiting for heat, waiting for the moment when the world is scorched and competitors are gone. These are not acts of desperation. They are calculated risks. They are decisions made in silence. Tonight, while you sleep, a leaf somewhere is turning bitter. A stem is thickening. A petal is summoning allies with a scent we cannot smell. Somewhere, a plant is changing itself, not to flee, not to fight, but to continue, to endure. Defense in the plant world is not about dominance. It is about balance. It is about knowing when to yield and when to resist, when to sweeten and when to sting. And in that stillness, in that green resolve, we see a different kind of power, a strength that does not boast, a wisdom that does not waver, a quiet, living intelligence shaped not by fear, but by adaptation, not by rage, but by response. The green world does not need to shout. It has already survived everything. There is a hush that falls over the garden just before dawn, not of sleep, but of anticipation. as if every bud is holding its breath, every petal listening. Then, slowly, with the rising warmth of morning, it begins. A soft opening, a subtle tilt, a glow deepening in color. Flowers turn their faces skyward, not just for light, but for love. For this is the part of the story where plants reach outward, where the inward rhythm of roots and leaves expands into a dance of connection. This is the dance of pollination, and it is older than wings, older than bees, older even than flowers. It began, perhaps, with wind. Long before petals unfolded, plants released their pollen into the air like wishes, like scattered dust. Some still do. Pines and grasses and oaks rely on breezes to carry their golden cargo. It is not targeted, but it works. Grains drifting and falling, finding the right place by chance and numbers and time. But then came flowers, an evolutionary gamble, an invitation written in color and shape and scent. Instead of waiting on wind, plants began to court the movers of the world. Insects, birds, mammals. They began to design themselves, not just for survival, but for attraction. A flower is a message. Its shape, its hue, its perfume, all of it tailored to the partner it seeks. Trumpet-shaped blossoms for hummingbirds whose long beaks sip nectar while their feathers brush the stamens. Bright, open discs for bees, marked with ultraviolet patterns, invisible to human eyes, but as clear as arrows to a pollinator. Night-blooming stars for moths, pale and fragrant, glowing softly in moonlight. Even the peculiar, pouch-like flowers of orchids, each a riddle designed for a single species, sometimes one pollinator in all the world. The exchange is simple. The flower offers nectar, sugar-rich and sparkling, sometimes hidden deep within a spiral or chamber or curled petal. In return, the visitor takes pollen, accidentally or with precision, and delivers it to another blossom. Reproduction, carried on wings. But it is more than transaction. It is choreography. A bee lands on a daisy, and the flower's anthers dust her fuzzy legs. A butterfly unfurls its proboscis into the tube of a honeysuckle, delicate and deliberate. A bat, brushing its fur against the stamens of a cactus flower, drinks deeply in the desert night. Each movement is part of a rhythm that has shaped both plant and pollinator. Co-evolution is the word science gives it, but it feels more like courtship, like duet. Even deception finds its place in this green romance. Some orchids mimic the scent of female bees, luring males to attempt mating with the flower itself, and in the process, picking up pollen. Others mimic the appearance of more rewarding flowers, tricking naive pollinators into visiting them. There are flowers that look like rotting flesh, drawing carrion flies, flowers that trap insects temporarily to ensure pollination before releasing them, flowers that vibrate, that warm themselves, that mimic. The dance is not always honest, but it is always effective, and within each petal lies a story of time. Flowers must bloom not just beautifully, but precisely. Too early, and pollinators may not be active. Too late, and competitors may have already drawn them away. Many flowers use internal clocks to time their blooming, responding to light and temperature and season. Some open only once, for a single day. Others bloom for weeks, changing color as they age to signal their readiness. A newly opened blossom might be bright blue, fading to violet when it has been pollinated. A signal to bees, this one is already spoken for. And still, the work goes on. Pollen grains, so small they drift like smoke, carry within them the blueprint of life, not to be wasted, but delivered, nestled into the ovary of awaiting bloom, where seeds will form, where fruit will begin. The fertilization is invisible, but its aftermath is not. Apples swell, pumpkins ripen. A single cherry tree properly pollinated can produce thousands of fruits, each a testament to a kiss of dust, a meeting in sunlight. And somewhere in all of this, the world is fed. Nearly 90% of flowering plants rely on pollinators. So do 3/4 of the world's crops. Without this ancient alliance, ecosystems would collapse, supermarkets would shrink, the color would drain from landscapes. It is not an exaggeration to say that every third bite of food you eat exists because of this quiet dance, because a bee once visited a flower, because a hummingbird once hovered near a bloom, because a plant once dared to open. And yet, it asks for nothing in return. Flowers do not demand attention, they do not chase, they wait, they bloom, they offer. If ignored, they close quietly. If visited, they give freely. There is no desperation, only openness. And what a lesson that is, to give beauty without demand, to offer sweetness without certainty, to open simply because it is time. Tonight, somewhere in the world, a moonflower is just now unfurling its white petals, perfuming the air for a moth that may or may not arrive. A cactus blossom opens for 1 hour, welcoming a bat that will sip and leave. A field of evening primrose pulses with scent under the stars, waiting for a visitor drawn by memory, by instinct, by need. And the plants, for their part, do not rush. They know the rhythms. They have practiced this for millennia. They trust that what comes will come. The dance of pollination is not just a strategy. It is a song. It is the way the green world reaches beyond itself, the way it connects, the way it loves. No voice, no hand, no eyes, and yet it flirts. It dazzles. It invites. And in return, it is touched. It is carried. It is made new. There is something about seeds that feels like a secret, a tiny, silent promise wrapped in a shell. They do not move, they do not glow, and yet, within their stillness, they hold the story of all things that grow. A seed is not a fragment, it is a beginning, an embryo of green possibility, a whisper of roots and leaves and time. It is a letter addressed to the future, sealed in patience, waiting for the right moment to be read. Hold a seed in your hand, and you are holding a memory. Not your own, but the plant's, a memory shaped in sunlight, nourished by water, tempered by wind. That acorn once hung from an oak, its cap like a beret, its body heavy with history. That speck of poppy once danced on the breeze, born from a crimson flower that bloomed in silence. That bean, smooth and curved like a sleeping animal, holds within it the full architecture of a plant yet to be. Seeds do not rush. They know how to wait. Some wake quickly. Within days they stir, split, and rise. But others sleep for years, decades, even centuries. There are seeds found in ancient tombs that, once given water, sprang to life as if the years were only moments. Some lie dormant in the soil, listening for fire. They wait for heat, for ash, for the particular signature of a forest burned and cleared, and only then do they open. They are not broken by destruction. They are awakened by it, and so, in every seed there is a kind of resilience, not of strength or speed, but of stillness, a readiness wrapped in quiet. The coat of a seed is not just a shell, it is a fortress. It protects the precious life inside from frost, from teeth, from rot. Some are soft, easily cracked by a passing foot. Others are hard as stone, requiring the wear of seasons, the belly of a bird, or the slow patience of time to open. Each seed is tuned to its world. Some need cold to wake, some need light, some need smoke. They are waiting always for just the right key. And when that key arrives, a drop of rain, a breath of warmth, a shift in daylight, the seed responds. It does not leap, it leans. It begins with the smallest act of trust. The seed coat softens, the embryo inside begins to stir. First, a rootlet emerges, delicate and pale, pushing downward in search of grounding. Then a shoot, reaching up toward a light it cannot yet see. This is germination. This is faith made visible. The first leaves to emerge are not like later leaves. They're cotyledons, seed leaves, thick and simple, designed to nourish the young plant until it can make its own food. They unfold like fingers, learning how to grasp. And then, slowly, the true leaves appear, shaped by species, by sunlight, by destiny. Some seeds are dispersed by wind. Maple keys, with their twin blades, spin like little helicopters through the air. Dandelion fluff rides thermals like parachutes, drifting into the unknown. Others float. Coconuts bob across oceans, carrying entire trees inside their hollow hearts. Some hitch rides. Burrs cling to fur, to socks, to feathers, embedding themselves into new soil miles from home. Some explode. The touch-me-not catapults its seeds outward with the slightest disturbance. Some tempt. Fruits grow soft and sweet, inviting animals to feast, then pass the seeds onward, encased in fertilizer, ready for life. And then there are the sleepers, desert seeds that wait for years, buried under dust and heat, until a single rare storm awakens them. Arctic seeds that lie dormant beneath snow for whole seasons. Lotus seeds, preserved in dry mud for centuries, bloom as if no time had passed. This patience is not passive. It is strategic. It is survival through silence. And yet, the seed is not only a survivor, it is a storyteller. The DNA it carries holds the history of its ancestors, the way they grew, the sunlight they loved, the droughts they endured. Encoded in that double helix are the instructions for branching, blooming, fruiting. The very shape of a leaf, the timing of a flower, the scent of a fruit, all held in code, waiting to be rewritten by weather, by soil, by chance. Seeds are also listeners. They respond not only to internal clocks, but to signals from the world. Soil temperature, day length, moisture levels, each becomes part of the decision. To germinate too early is to risk death. To wait too long is to miss a window. The seed balances risk and reward, always listening for the right song, and when it chooses to grow, it does so without fear. Imagine being buried in darkness, sensing only pressure and cold, and still choosing to stretch toward a light you've never seen. That is the miracle of germination. That is the quiet bravery of the seed. Each time you eat a piece of fruit, you hold in your hand not just nourishment, but inheritance. Every apple carries the seeds of a new tree. Every pepper, a packet of fire and future. We slice them, cook them, toss them aside, but they are still full of life, still full of stories waiting to be told in roots and leaves. The bean sprouting in a jar on your windowsill is practicing a language as old as forests. The sprig of basil, freshly pinched, is only weeks from seed and still tastes of sunlight and soil. In gardens, in fields, in sidewalk cracks, the story repeats. The seed falls, the seed waits, the seed becomes. And in becoming, it reminds us growth is not always loud. Sometimes it is tucked away, invisible, unnoticed, but no less powerful. Somewhere tonight, in the darkness beneath a garden, a seed coat is beginning to crack. Not because it is broken, but because it is ready. A root tip presses downward like a question. A shoot stretches upward like a breath. And the world, with its storms and its seasons, makes room. What was once invisible begins to rise. Growth in the plant world and is not a race. It does not charge or clamor. It moves in pulses, in waves almost too slow to see, and yet too profound to miss. If you could sit still for a week, eyes open to the rhythm of green things, you would witness it, the gentle reach of stems, the slow lean toward light, the quiet swell of a bud preparing to bloom. Plants do not grow with noise, they grow with intention. There is a rhythm to it, a kind of biological tide, governed not by chance but by choreography, orchestrated by hormones, by water pressure, by time. Growth in plants begins not with muscle, but with a signal, a whisper passed cell to cell, guiding the elongation of tissues, the division of cells, the direction of each tender unfolding. At the heart of this rhythm is a molecule called auxin, a tiny invisible conductor of the plant's internal symphony. Auxin flows downward from the growing tip, of root, of stem, of leaf, redistributing itself in response to light, to gravity, to touch. When light touches one side of a stem, auxin gathers on the shaded side, causing cells there to elongate more rapidly. And so the plant bends toward the light, not with eyes, not with thought, but with chemistry and grace. Where a root touches soil, auxin speaks differently. There, it slows growth, guiding the root downward, helping it curve around stone, sink into coolness, seek out water. It is a dialogue between environment and cell, a dance of molecules and meaning. Other messengers join the orchestra. Cytokinins promote cell division, urging roots to branch and buds to form. Gibberellins elongate stems, lifting flowers toward the sun. Abscisic acid brings calm, slowing growth, closing stomata, preparing the plant for drought. Ethylene, a gas, ripens fruit and softens leaves, signaling when it is time to release, to let go. None of these work alone. They weave together a chemical conversation, modulating and responding in real time. If auxin says grow, abscisic acid may say wait. If gibberellins say stretch, ethylene may say slow down. The plant listens to them all. It does not choose a single voice. It harmonizes. And water, water is not just nourishment. It is movement. It provides the pressure that keeps stems firm, that drives cells to expand. Each plant cell is a balloon of potential, its walls stretching ever so slightly as water fills its center, pushing outward. When that pressure is lost, through drought, through heat, the plant wilts, not from weakness, but from absence. It knows how to stand. It simply lacks the fullness to do so. Growth is not a single moment. It is continuous, layered. A tree ring marks each year, its width speaking of abundance or scarcity. A vine's tendrils remember every object they've touched. The bend of a branch remembers the wind. A leaf's tilt remembers the angle of the sun in early spring. Each part of the plant is a record of movement, of time, of listening, and not all growth is upward. Roots grow down and out, seeking balance between gravity and resource. They branch in fractals, dividing and dividing again, creating a mirror of the canopy above. If you could lift a tree from the soil and see its entire root system, every fine hair, every nodal turn, it would look like a lightning strike paused mid-burst, a frozen storm of search and reach. Even in stillness, the plant is moving. Through its veins, xylem and phloem, water and sugar travel, pulled and pushed by pressure, by need. In the xylem, water flows upward from root to leaf, driven by transpiration, the gentle release of vapor through stomata, drawing more upward like a straw. In the phloem, sugar flows in all directions, from sources of production to sinks of growth, feeding buds, roots, seeds. The plant knows what to send and where. It adjusts its flow like a wise gardener, distributing resources based on priority, on season, on the soft logic of survival. And still, it does not rush. There are plants that take years to bloom, like the agave, which may grow for decades before sending up a towering stalk, flowering once and then dying. There are bristlecone pines that add less than a millimeter a year, carving out a life that spans millennia. There are mosses that creep across stone at a pace so slow they are more memory than motion. And yet, each is growing, each is changing, each is alive in the way that mountains are alive, imperceptibly, continuously, undeniably. Even decay is part of growth. As leaves fall, as bark peels, as petals collapse into softness, they return their materials to the soil. They are not lost, they are reabsorbed. A fallen flower feeds a root. A dropped seed becomes forest. Nothing is wasted. Everything participates in the rhythm. Plants do not grow simply because they can. They grow because they must, not for glory, not for ambition, but for balance, to reach what they need, to escape what harms them, to bloom, to fruit, to seed again. This is not a linear journey. It spirals. A branch splits and splits again. A root forks, then forks again. Leaves arrange themselves in phylactic spirals, maximizing light, minimizing shadow. There is math here. There is music. There is meaning. And if you touch a growing tip, gently, reverently, you might feel a softness unlike any other. A tissue still forming, still listening, still choosing. That is the meristem, the source of new cells, of structure, of shape. The plant's future resides in those tiny regions, smaller than a grain of rice, yet holding the blueprint for forests. Somewhere, right now, a bud is swelling, not to rush, but because the light has returned. A stem is elongating, pushing through frost-softened earth. A leaf is unfurling, its veins filling like riverbeds. A vine is turning slightly, sensing a nearby pole. And in a forest, unseen beneath the mulch, a rootlet extends half a millimeter toward a richer patch of soil. No announcement, no fireworks, just the quiet continuation of life. There is a clock inside every leaf, not made of gears or hands or ticking seconds, but of rhythm, of quiet, of light and shadow. Plants do not measure time as we do, yet they know it intimately. They feel it in the arc of the sun, in the length of night, in the first pale blush of morning. Their lives are stitched not by hours, but by patterns, circadian rhythms that flow not in minutes, but in light. Long before humans marked days with calendars or carved hours into stone, plants had already learned the rhythm of the world. A leaf folds as evening comes. A flower opens precisely at dawn. A cactus swells with moonlight. These are not coincidences. These are memories. Inside the cells of a plant are genetic timekeepers, oscillating genes that turn on and off in a looping dance, responding to light, to darkness, to temperature. These loops make up the circadian clock, a 24-hour cycle of anticipation and response. It is not dictated by the sun, but trained by it. Even in constant darkness, the clock continues, ticking softly in chloroplasts and nuclei, carrying the memory of light. And what a quiet choreography it guides. When the day begins, leaves turn not randomly, but in preparation. Stomata, the tiny pores on the underside of leaves, begin to open. They are the mouths of the plant, breathing in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, exhaling oxygen into the air. But they do not fling open recklessly. They open with timing, with awareness. They know the day has begun. Photosynthesis follows like a second heartbeat. Sugar begins to flow. Water is drawn upward from the roots. The plant stands at its tallest, every cell humming with intention. But even now it remembers the night. It knows how long the day will last. Flowers bloom according to their own clocks. Some, like morning glories, open with the sunrise and close by noon. Others, like evening primrose, begin their bloom just as twilight settles, scenting the air for night pollinators. These timings are not learned. They are inherited, internal schedules passed down through generations. A garden is a symphony of clocks, each plant striking its own hour. The sunflower, famous for its heliotropism, turns its face from east to west over the course of the day, tracking the sun's movement across the sky. But it is not the light alone that guides this dance. Even in artificial environments, with steady light, young sunflowers continue to move, anticipating where the sun should be. It is not reaction, it is prediction. At night, the rhythm shifts. The plant does not sleep in the way we do, but it rests. Photosynthesis ceases. Respiration continues, slower, more subdued. Sugars made during the day are stored, then slowly used to fuel growth and repair. The plant listens to the cool, it adjusts. In some species, leaves fold or droop, not from fatigue, but from preservation, from preparation. Circadian rhythms help plants anticipate stress. Before dawn, certain protective proteins begin to accumulate, guarding against the sudden influx of light. Before a drought deepens, internal changes prepare the tissues for loss. The clock does not wait for crisis. It reads the signs. It moves ahead. In the Arctic, where days stretch endlessly in summer and vanish entirely in winter, plants adjust. Their rhythms slow, stretch, condense. They bloom in brief explosions of light, then retreat to long dormancies. Even without a steady cycle, they find time's echo in temperature, in moisture, in the subtle tilt of the Earth's axis. And even seeds, sleeping in soil, have clocks. Some will not germinate unless a certain number of cold hours have passed, a chilling requirement, ensuring they wait until spring truly comes. Others need light cues to trigger growth, using phytochromes, light-sensitive proteins, to detect when they are buried too deep or when canopy cover has shifted. They emerge only when the time is right. There is, too, a yearly rhythm, the circannual clock, guiding flowering, fruiting, leaf drop. In temperate forests, trees begin preparing for autumn long before the leaves turn. Hormonal changes shift nutrients back to the trunk, seal off leaf stems, produce the pigments we call color. Deciduous trees are not surprised by winter. They are ready. And in the tropics, where day length barely changes, other cues take over. Rainfall patterns, moon cycles, even the activity of pollinators all become signals. A fig tree may time its fruiting to match the presence of a specific wasp. A bamboo species may flower only once every 100 years, and somehow all individuals of that species bloom together, even those separated by oceans. It is one of the strangest and most beautiful mysteries in botany, a secret calendar shared across generations. We are only just beginning to understand how deeply plants know time, how it lives in every part of them, not just in flowering or fruiting, but in healing, in defense, in memory. If a leaf is wounded, the speed at which it responds changes depending on the time of day. If a pathogen strikes, the plant's immune response is stronger or weaker depending on its internal clock. Time for plants is not a backdrop, it is a companion, a co author of life. And perhaps we have something to learn from this. In a world that races, that demands instant bloom and constant productivity, plants remind us that growth has rhythm, that rest is not idleness, but part of the pattern, that anticipation, quiet, uncelebrated, is a form of wisdom. Somewhere tonight, a morning glory is folding into itself. A tulip bulb is sensing the deepening dark, adjusting its metabolism in the cold soil. A fern is unfurling its thoughts in moonlight, and deep inside each of them, a clock is ticking. Not loudly, not insistently, but faithfully. The green world does not need reminders. It remembers, always. There are trees that remember fire, not just with charred bark or blackened trunks, but in their very cells, scars folded into the rings of time, stories coiled in lignin and resin. A pine forest may look silent, may seem still, but beneath the moss and leaf-littered floor, it is a library of flames, of droughts, of winds, of waiting. Trees are not merely tall, they are old, and in their age they hold memory, not as images or words, but as shape, as chemistry, as quiet persistence. If you run your fingers across the bark of an ancient oak, you are not touching just surface, you are touching time. That roughness, that depth, that slow, spiraled ridging, it is not randomness. It is what remains after decades of seasons. Every ring within the trunk is a page in the autobiography of weather. A wide ring speaks of sun and rain and ease. A narrow one of struggle. A scar shows where lightning came too close, where beetles carved paths in secret, where cold bit too deeply one winter long ago. Some trees carry thousands of such entries. Bristlecone pines, wind-battered and stoic, have watched the stars shift overhead for nearly 5 millennia. They were seedlings when pyramids were rising. Their roots stretch into stone, and their crowns whisper to snow. They are not what they once were. Much of their wood is dead, their growth slow, but they are still alive, still remembering. This is the long memory of plants. Not fast, not vivid, not like ours, but enduring, reliable, true. Even the young remember in their way. A bean sprout touched gently each day will grow thicker and shorter, bracing for wind it has never known. A sunflower seedling tilted toward the light will bend, and if you shift that light, it will remember where it came from and bend again. Over time, patterns form, patterns become habit, habits become growth, and forests, oh, forests remember together. Through root networks, through fungal threads, through the chemical exchange of leaves and air and soil, trees share signals. A mother tree, one that has stood for centuries, may nourish her offspring through underground connections, sending extra sugars, adjusting chemistry to help them thrive. And when she begins to die, she may release nitrogen, carbon, and messages of change, not in sorrow, but in generosity. Her memory is passed not through genes alone, but through shared space, through shared nourishment. Her story becomes theirs. Even deciduous trees, in temperate climates, tell time not just by clocks, but by collective wisdom. As summer fades, a signal passes leaf to leaf. It's time. Time to stop photosynthesizing, time to pull in the last nutrients, time to let go. And so the forest changes color, not randomly, but in a coordinated farewell. Pigments emerge not for beauty, but as part of the withdrawal. The green fades, the reds and yellows rise, leaves fall, and in falling they feed the soil, and in the soil the memory remains. There are species that bloom only after fire, seeds that cannot open without heat, cones that need flame to melt their resin. These plants are born of destruction, but they do not fear it. They understand it. Fire is not an end. It is part of the cycle. The ash feeds the next generation. The blackened ground welcomes light. Even in deserts, plants remember rain. Some seeds can lie dormant for years, their coats hard as stone, until a specific pattern of moisture tells them it is time. And then they bloom all at once, a desert painted in petals for a moment before retreating again into stillness. This is not fragility. It is discipline. It is the discipline of memory. And in every place where plants live, on mountain tops, in marshes, in cities pressed between concrete, they adjust themselves to what came before. They record each experience in growth, in shape, in chemistry. A plant stressed by drought one season may grow deeper roots the next. One that has felt frost may alter the thickness of its leaves. Memory becomes morphology. The past becomes the present. We often think of memory as something internal, intangible, but in plants, memory is physical. It is form. A leaning trunk remembers the wind. A twisted vine remembers the trellis. A scorched bark remembers the sun. They carry their experiences not behind their eyes, but beneath their skin. And so, in this way, they become witnesses. Quiet ones, patient ones. To walk through a grove of trees is to walk through history, not written on paper, but on bark, on limb, on soil. A place where seasons are archived in shade, where time is measured not by clocks, but by how far the roots have reached. Even the smallest plants hold stories. A dandelion, plucked and scattered by a child's breath, holds the memory of thousands of others, every seed a copy of resilience. Mosses remember the damp, ferns remember the shade. Their form is memory made green, and perhaps, in some subtle way, we remember them too. When we sit quietly beneath a tree, when we trace the edge of a leaf with our eyes, when we breathe in the smell of earth after rain, we are not just observing, we are resonating. We too are shaped by time. We too carry what has come before, and in that shared rhythm, something inside us slows. There is no need to rush. The plant does not rush. The tree does not measure its life in milestones or